I think all of you can relate to this scenario. One of your lawyers is at a networking event, and they're introduced to someone who has potential to turn into a client. The individual is ultimately interested in learning more about the firm and the lawyer's areas of expertise. In this scenario, the lawyer likely wouldn't go into a canned diatribe about the firm's strengths, statistics about the firm, and facts about the practice.
Instead, that partner would likely ask some questions about the individual's business, what their legal needs are, gather other pertinent information to help shape her response. Your website is a facilitator similar to a similar conversation with your prospective clients, as well as, in many instances, your current clients. So why not take a similar approach? I think that we can all agree that there are stages in any buying cycle. Initially, someone needs to become aware of your firm or a specific partner, if that's the case. Something needs to occur to generate their interest in you. Perhaps this is a referral from someone they trust. Perhaps this is an impression that you can handle their needs. But once they've identified that interest, they'll spend some time qualifying you or validating your capabilities. Assuming what they find is suitable, they may choose to take the next step, which is to engage you in some manner.
Now, we understand that the website in this industry is not necessarily involved in point of sale as it is for e-commerce. We're not expecting someone to fill out a form for legal services on your website. The websites themselves are not transactional in nature. Instead, the site is critical in the interest and validation stage, primarily validation. If someone's looking on Google for a firm that can meet their needs, then the website may assist with the interest stage. But once the buyer has interest, the website is immediately serving as a credentialing tool to help the buyer validate your capabilities and your work.
Now, just like in the scenario of the partner at the networking event, doesn't it make sense to focus on sharing with this potential buyer the information that would be of most interest to them? Getting that information to the buyer that the buyer is interested in them and reducing the amount of work they need to find it is what personalization is all about. Now, the validation stage is an ongoing process, and it's relevant realistically for firm current clients as well. Over time, we know that clients and potential clients come back to your site. In 2012, One North conducted a survey of general counsel to learn about how they use law firm websites, among many other things. And many of the general counsel that we interviewed indicated that they visit the websites of law firms they're considering working with once or twice per month. Though these visits may be as short and practical as looking at an attorney's biography or finding relevant contact information, they leave a deep impression on the visitor. It's really crucial that law firms have up-to-date content and a stream of relevant and original material that's easy to access. Some of the things that these GCs pointed out as of specific interest to them are information that match their exact interests, expert knowledge of the industry or sector, and also quick and straightforward access to the information that's most relevant to them. So right now, websites in our industry do a really great job at presenting, but what they're not as good at doing is listening. They promote the way you work, the experience you and your attorneys have. They do this by pushing forward information, showcasing the firm, including experience, content, publications, practice information, and biographies. And from each of these types of information, the site points to other things that may be of interest in the form of what's often referred to as related information. In the current model, a visitor to the site needs to find their way around based on the relationship you've set up. The information is less driven by their interests and more akin to them figuring out how their interests fit into your firm's information model. The next step of the web will make finding relevant information on a website less of an active experience. Instead, the relevant information will find its way to you.
I mean, really, technology has matured. For the purposes of the legal industry, we aren't talking about a user logging in, checking a bunch of preference checkboxes to build a custom view of the content on your site. We don't want users building their own personal iGoogle or My Yahoo page. Rather, there are two key areas that technology maturation impacts the efficiency with which we drive users to information. The first, we've seen many of our clients enhance functionality around their site's search engine. This extends the idea that search is a navigational tool, allowing users to more easily find content they're looking for. This is driven by user action and relies on the website visitor knowing what they're looking for from what is available. Users may not know that you wrote that white paper or published some perspective on a recent piece of legislation. Personalization, on the other hand, allows firms to push content to users by targeting content based on identifying users' interests, then surfacing and positioning key relevant content in strategic areas of the site.
important for us to point out that we're not suggesting rewriting content to target various audiences. That's not really what personalization is. Instead, the idea is to leverage your existing content and target it towards your audiences strategically. So here's an example. Let's say one of your attorneys publishes an article on what first to file means for you. This content is clearly relevant to multiple different types of audiences. So through the use of personalization, we can position that same piece of content differently so that it targets what we understand the website visitor's interests to be. So let's say in an IP, in someone who we've identified with interest in intellectual property, we might position that same article as learn what the America Invents Act means for your patent procedures and litigation. For someone who we know is interested in the pharmaceutical industry, we might position that same article as understand how to preserve your first to invent patent applications filed before March 16th. So it's the same content that's being leveraged in different ways based on what we've identified as the interests of our particular audience.
The web initially accommodated very basic sites with static content that were manually updated. From there, sites became more tactical, driven by content management systems that allowed for relationships between content. Something like this attorney is related to this practice, or this attorney in practice are related to this set of news. Now, moving forward, we're seeing the technology advance to allow for the content to be targeted to a user based on their behavior and their inferred interests based on that.
So a website that's operating at the more strategic level is really measuring traffic and targeting high-value content through conditional personalization, which we'll talk about more. And this is really where we want to move our industry. The trajectory of the industry is to move towards the engaged stage, which is leveraging predictive personalization, which is really the use of automating that targeting based on personas. So at the very basic level, moving along the legal digital maturity model shifts you from looking quantitatively at page views and hits, for example, to looking more qualitatively at the content on your site. Are users getting to the high-value content you want them to validate your firm's capabilities? The point of moving to strategic and utilizing personalization is to help you get that content to your site visitors more easily. So by leveraging this technology, it really enables you to understand what the interests are of your site visitors and surface content aligned with those interests. Your firm and your firm's website will be best positioned to serve your audience in terms of what we know they're looking for. So, the things that we heard from General Counsel, we know that there's an expectation that you will provide them with information that actually matches what they're looking for, and they want to know what your expertise is in the areas in which they have needs. So understanding that they're likely going to return to the site repeatedly, the more information they read on their interests and needs, the more likely they are to feel that you are well suited to meet their needs and build a level of trust with you.
So how do we do this? I mean, really, when we talk about personalization, there's three types of personalization, which we'll touch on in a second. There's explicit, conditional, and predictive. Explicit personalization is really Amazon.com. Think Amazon. I explicitly log into Amazon. They know my browsing history. They know what I've purchased previously. And from that data, they can draw conclusions as to what I might be interested in purchasing next. So this works well in a B2C scenario. But there may be some cases in the legal industry where explicit personalization will work. However, is it really realistic to ask users to log into a site on a regular basis? We were curious, so we asked.
It turns out no, not likely. Almost 3/4 of the users noted that they don't want to provide login information. So what this is really saying is that our target audience wants to have their cake and eat it too. They want firms to show the relevant content to them, but they don't want to provide the personal information on which to target content. So this then takes us to the other two types of personalization.
So implicit personalization. Implicit personalization allows the content administrator to customize content and functionality on the site. It does this by using the digital fingerprint in site usage patterns. Without the user even providing any explicit information, there's a wealth of data points on which you can personalize the experience. Every user coming to the site has a unique set of information that describes them. If you've ever reviewed your site's traffic analytics, you know some of those data points: IP address, browser type, device type, language, and a lot of other data points. In addition, information on browsing history, search term referrals, and many other points are captured. So rather than just reporting on these elements after the fact, real-time decisions can be made to the site, on the site. Conditional personalization is a great gateway into personalization. If you think about Microsoft Outlook inbox rules, they're a great practical example of conditional personalization. If I get an email from Sarah, file it automatically in my Sarah Levine-Meyer folder. Based on attributes provided in the digital fingerprint, the content can be targeted or the site personalized in some way to the end user. So in our example, if the user comes in and we know from their GeoIP that they're from England, and we see their Google referral keyword is tax law, we can target content on UK tax law on that page to them. Also, using cookies, you can persist this data so that we can use that information on subsequent visits. So maybe the next time our fictitious British user comes back to the site, we can continue to target them with UK tax law or other content based on browsing history that they had on their last visit.
So conditional personalization is really a method of implicit personalization that allows you to get quick and easy wins. The drawback to conditional personalization is that as you have more and more personalization needs or interests, you need to continually build new content targeting rules. While it doesn't scale up over the long term, it does help firms support specific business development strategies. And this is really where we see our clients moving, at least initially, maturing really from the tactical to the strategic level on the digital maturity model.
Moving up from there then, though, down the road, predictive personalization starts really with a strong content strategy. Content administrators profile site content according to audience needs. The content is given a profile value or a score relative to other content. As a user views content on your site, the content management system tracks that user's cumulative score on several data points. Predictive personalization happens in real time on a website, dynamically serving relevant content to users. The points accumulated and tracked by the content management system on the site help to determine a site visitor's interest, matching them to a user profile that's been developed in the content management system. As that user navigates the site after matching a user profile, predetermined areas of the site pages will dynamically target profiled content that is appropriate for that user profile. The user does not have to think about how to navigate to the content that they need. The system learns about the user and delivers relevant content to them.
So conditional personalization serves as a gateway then to predictive personalization. Both are forms of of personalizing content implicitly. Firms are not going to jump right into predictive personalization, or at least we don't expect them to. Rather, after mastering conditional personalization, or at least leveraging that technique, firms will have the data and the knowledge to then move to what we're referring to as the engaged level on the maturity model, implementing personas and then predictive personalization based on those personas. So looking again at our same example with what first to file means for you, we're going to look at this in the context of both conditional and then predictive personalization. So in the instance of conditional personalization, where firms get leveraging that technology or that technique on their site, they might identify that a user got to the site from Google by entering the search term intellectual property law firm. At that point, based on some conditional rule, they might present the same content, so what first to file means for you, in the IP targeted highlight. In similar fashion, if someone Googled pharmaceutical industry legal experience, they might then present the pharma-focused highlight to that individual. So again, same content, but using different rules, in this case conditional personalization, to identify when to present a different targeted presentation of that content. With predictive personalization, the difference is simply that the rules are different. So in this case, the user with the IP focus has visited several IP litigation profile pages, let's say on the site, for example, and they've then matched a persona that is identified to be an intellectual property general counsel. Through the matching of that profile, we can then decide to present the IP version of the highlight for that article. And similarly, if someone has visited several pages on the site that have been profiled for a pharma GC, for example, we could do the same type of thing where we're targeting then the pharmaceutical highlight to that individual. So the end result is similar in that we're targeting the same content to individual users based on what we've identified as their interests, but the method in which we get there looks a little bit different based on the type of personalization we're employing.
All right, great. So now why don't we take a look at what this looks like on a legal website. Why don't we? So right now I have our demo site for North and Madison up. North and Madison wants to build, the firm wants to build its intellectual property practice this year. As part of a broader marketing initiative, North and Madison wants to showcase their thought leadership and experience to people who are interested in intellectual property litigation when they come to visit the site. So I, the web user, am a GC visiting North and Madison. North and Madison's on my short list of firms that I'm working with, and I'm just vetting their experience in IP Lit. I'm exactly the type of user that North and Madison is trying to target its content to on the site. So as a user, I'm going to start on the home page and go to the practice page. From here, I'm going to, obviously, they're highlighting intellectual property litigation, so I'm going to go right to that page. On the page, I can scroll down, take a look at the description of the practice, scroll down to the and take a look at the attorneys. Now I'm based in Chicago, so I want to get to know what Rachel Abbott Smith, practice lead, is like in the Chicago area. So I'm going to visit Rachel Abbott Smith's site. As I read through her bio, I take a look at some of the other areas that she practices in. I want to take a look at some of her expertise. And as I'm reading through, I realize, I really want to learn more about the expertise of the law firm in intellectual property. So I click on the link to go to the expertise section of the site, scroll through, take a look, decide that I want to take a look at this matter, this processing Inc. matter. And when I get to the page, I can browse through, I can look at the description, but I also notice now that there's a call to action at the top of the page, notifying me that there's some other content that I may be interested in. Having browsed through the site, looking at my browsing history, the content management system started to learn what I was looking at. Having seen that I looked at Rachel Abbott Smith's site or page, looked at experience related to intellectual property litigation as well as the intellectual property litigation page, the system knew that it should target me with content based on Rachel Abbott Smith and also IP litigation. So now I can link off of this and go read the publication that Rachel Abbott Smith put together on top 10 tips for startups facing patent troll suits. So while this is somewhat of a subtle way of going about doing personalization, you can see that it's incredibly effective for driving content to end users based on their interests. Why don't we go back to the demo now?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things to consider is really what this means. What we're saying is that the industry is really moving forward in an effort to be more active in terms of the way that it's targeting the content to the site visitors. So what does this really mean for you? The first step is really to think about how your site or the next iteration of your site can benefit from these techniques. This is something your website vendor can help with. The goal of moving from tactical to strategic, tactical where we're just sort of pointing out what's related, to strategic where we're actually presenting you with things that might be of interest, then I think it's important to think about where and how it might make sense to leverage these techniques. So utilizing personalization will impact the way you currently operate in a few different ways. The first step to personalizing your site is really to identify specific business development goals, as these goals are what should drive your personalization efforts and how you should target your content. So next, you want to really assess your content against the business development goals. Personalized content should support the goals, and it should be anticipated that your strategy will change over time. The site needs to be updated to enable the promotion of your personalized content, and as a content owner, you'll need to determine how you want to position that information. In other words, what language to use in various scenarios you're targeting. So, but back to the America Invents Act example that we showed earlier, what does the targeted content look like when we're targeting, audience A versus audience B, for example. Now, if it seems daunting, keep in mind that you're not doing this alone. If you partner with One North or whoever your website vendor is, it's likely that they're able to help work through these strategies and develop an approach to personalizing content on your website. But most importantly, I think it's important to realize that as you leverage your content more strategically, you really should anticipate a shift in the life cycle of website development and maintenance.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, really right now when we look at the way that sites are managed and updated in the industry, we look at these spikes in activity. So you go through a huge design and strategy phase and then a huge build, only to go into maintenance until you decide to do this again. This usually happens every few years for firms. What we want to do is move to a more strategic approach to handling website updates.
So what this new approach really looks like is you go through your design and strategy, and you build the website. But then once the site is built, it's really an ongoing process where you strategize how you're going to promote and leverage content. You personalize that content, you analyze, and you continue to do so. You keep updating. Maybe your strategies change. Perhaps you have new or different business development goals. But the approach and the level of engagement and involvement with the website really is going to shift to be more active on an ongoing basis. So this really, this likely means a shift in roles and responsibilities post-launch, which is important to be thinking of as you move forward. At this point, it's probably important to identify the appetite for your firm moving to a more strategic approach. Really what are the specific business development goals, and how can targeting content towards your audience on the site help achieve those business development goals? We really want to be focused on leveraging the great information that your firm is producing in multiple different ways to multiple different audiences without having to create more content. So, working with your vendor to figure out what that strategy might look like for you is an important step forward. And really considering those content roles and responsibilities. So there will be, whoever is producing the content will likely remain in place and the same people as they are now. But thinking about how to leverage that content will be another aspect or another role within the organization. And then really working with a website partner on a personalization plan for your site. That's really an important next step as you decide to move forward. So I think that at this point we're ready for questions or comments from the audience.
Okay, just a reminder, if you have a question, you can submit it using the question function located in the GoToWebinar control panel at the right side of your screen. Okay, the first question is, how much of this are we seeing in the legal market today? Are firms really starting to do this?
Yeah, I mean, really there's, outside of the legal market, there's becoming this minimum expectation that there's going to be some level of personalization and content targeting on a website. And we're going to start to see that seep into legal. So if firms want to be kind of on the leading edge of what they're doing with their site and really start to meet the needs of what people are seeing outside of legal, we want to make sure that, that they're employing these kind of techniques to target content to their end users.
The next one is, with Google hiding keyword information from logged-in Google account holders, the keyword not provided issue, will this make it difficult to use conditional personalization for many search-referred visitors?
That's a great question. I mean, that certainly could cause issues, but there's also a broader set of information that we can personalize the site on. So while Google referral keywords and stuff may be one aspect, there's other aspects including IP, geolocation, of users, browsing history and stuff that we can use to personalize content and target it on the site.
Or even just the way that they're navigating around the
Exactly.
site specifically.
Exactly.
Okay, the next question is, how do the EU cookie laws play into the personalization effort?
That's a fantastic question too. Really, when we look at the EU cookie laws, the way we're seeing a lot of that being interpreted and implemented in the market is that users are getting notified that a cookie will be used to kind of improve the experience of using that particular site. If users decide to opt out, that's great. We're not saying that by not having personalization on the site that the site's going to become unusable. It's just that those key areas of the site where we would be targeting users with content would just fall back to maybe rather than showing, if I'm the IP litigation general counsel, rather than showing me information that's targeted specifically to me, might just show the most recent 5 articles on a particular topic. So to the end user, they're still going to have a very usable and very, still a very good site. It's just that we want to make it, kind of take it up a notch by adding in personalization. Yeah, and really, I mean, to extend on that response, there's other ways that we can also, do personalization within the site. Cookies really are employed for kind of cross-section personalization. So if I look at a bunch of intellectual property litigation today, if I come back to the site tomorrow, a cookie could be used to remember that I did that and target content to me on a subsequent visit. I could also then, just within that single session, target content to the user. We might not have as rich a history on that user, but we can still target content, and we can use multiple different ways of looking at personalizing content, to the point earlier of data points that we can use to target content. So we don't necessarily need to use cookies to personalize the site.
Okay, the next one is, in a slide you said you can determine that a visitor is a GC. How can you do that?
It's not so much that that we explicitly know that that person is a GC. What we're going to do is, when we do persona-based personalization, we're going to look at the way that we anticipate a GC using the site, and when we see those usage patterns on the site as a user navigates to the site, we will then match that person to that pattern that we've labeled as GC. So it's not that we know explicitly, we're not going to look at their IP address and know that they're coming from a Fortune 500 company and infer that they're a GC. We're going to look at the usage patterns of what we would anticipate a GC looking at on the site and then match that person into that persona.
The next question is, this almost looks blogish or newsish. Is that a trend?
So I think what this question is referring to, and making an assumption here, but I think it's the website itself. The site itself does have a sort of blog-ish style or design to it. But what's interesting is that the content itself is being leveraged and promoted in a way that you may find similar to some news sites that you're used to navigating. So in that sense, it is becoming a little bit more of a trend.
Okay, the next question is, can you provide more examples of sites in the legal or other industries that use implicit personalization? And I think that Jeff is queuing up to show you guys some more.
Okay, so one of the questions was, can you show us some examples of implicit personalization, either in legal or outside of legal? And outside of legal, really a couple of the great places that we've seen it. First is the New York Times. So as I'm looking at a story on the New York Times, let's say I'll look at something related to the legislation on gay marriage, the Supreme Court ruling on gay marriage. As I start to look through, first off, I see obvious things that show related content, what's popular, most emailed, that kind of stuff. But as I start to scroll down through the page, what I'll see is that I'll also get I'll get targeted content to me in terms of personalization, showing me other things that I may be interested in reading here. Now, this may be done a little bit toward just related content, but in another example, on Wired magazine, I read Wired a lot. It's a pretty kind of geeky magazine, but there's an article on here on how we would bring back the passenger pigeon from extinction. As I start to scroll through it, I can see more recent ones. This is related information. But as I start to get to the bottom of as I scroll through the article, which by the way is a great read, I highly recommend it. When we start to go through, I can see related things in terms of next and previous articles. But when I get to the bottom, I see related than I also get you might like based on other things that I've looked at within the site. Now, really there's an opportunity here as well for Wired, which actually Sarah and I talked about this the other day, that when we look at previous and next, while they may be just looking at them in a chronological sense, based on my usage of the site, it also may want to offer me the next possible personalized article that maybe there's another article on bringing back carrier pigeons from extinction. But really, based on other articles that I've looked at and other metadata around those articles, there's a great opportunity for Wired to target more content at me as well.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions today. If we didn't get to your question, we will be following up afterward. And if you have any additional questions you didn't get a chance to ask, you can go ahead and send them over to me at tortiz@onenorth.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful day.